So I've had the lucky pleasure of actually interviewing Andre. This is the second time we're now together on stage, so it's a fantastic opportunity. And yes, he's a tennis legend, a superstar, but there's so much more to his story, and I think that's where we're going to start off today. Not everybody knows that he actually used to hate playing tennis, and it was something that was encouraged by his father, pressure to be number one, pressure to be the best at the game, and his definition of success that actually kept him at the game for a very long time before he reached number one. Andre, why don't you share with us your story and really how you got into the world of tennis?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here in New Delhi, and thank you for staying up past my bedtime. That I really appreciate. But my hatred sort of for tennis that I disclosed, in my book when I was done, it kind of started with fear, to be quite honest. Fear of watching what tennis did to my siblings and their relationship, with my father. I was the youngest of four, and winning and losing really did dictate something very powerful in my life, and that was whether we were having dinner together as a family, whether we were happy, or whether we were sort of in misery. So as the pressure sort of fell on my shoulders, I had a great deal of resentment towards what tennis was doing to us as a whole, and watching it and what it did to my siblings. And that frustration, that conflict of being so thought highly of by my father, so he was so proud of me, it was all those things, but it also meant the intensity of what he brought as well, and the pressure sort of fell on my shoulders, which as a youngster it's pretty hard to bear. And I think the greatest fear probably came in the ultimate expression of abandonment when he sent me away from home when I was 13, to move to a tennis academy. It was more like a military academy, and that just only expedited my connection to the game, my desire to be a part of it. But unfortunately, the only way out was to succeed, and I can honestly say that fear is, if nothing else, certainly a great motivator.
You've talked about fear a lot and how that motivated you, but clearly there was also talent before you actually mastered the game. I mean, you reached global standards, world number one, before you actually had your first breakdown.
Well, yeah, the only way out was to win, but beyond just sort of getting out of my circumstances, I had this distant hope in my heart and mind that somehow winning was going to be the answer to my connection, right? An answer to what I was suffering every time I would sort of step on a tennis court that nobody really, knew about. My father used to introduce me as the future #1 tennis player in the world, so not a lot of margin for error there, you know what I mean? And so I would win, and then I would win, and then eventually I got to a point where the last thing for me to accomplish was to be ranked #1, and I had this little bit of this expectation that somehow things would make more sense when I achieved that. And the ironic part was, when I got to #1 in the world, it was one of the greatest disappointments of my life, because I absolutely felt nothing, nothing. And that sort of led me down a pretty dark path for a while.
In your journey as a tennis player, a lot of that resentment, did it also come out on the courts, the anger, the resentment? You were always seen as a bit of a rebel in your career. We've had a lot of instances, much talked about, not just competitive rivalry, but in terms of how you stood out vis-a-vis some of the others, in terms of your demeanor and so on. When you look back today, I can already see the amusement in your eyes, but how would you describe that phase?
At the time, rebellion was the only thing that I had ownership of in my life, right? Yeah. I had the choice to rebel or not to rebel. So in a way, I was exercising the only choice I really had, and people sort of started on the world stage, whether it was the media or whether it was, the fans, or whether it was the sport companies who were building this brand around me. But, they were telling me, basically who I was, and in some cases asking me to explain who I was. And I think some of all that rebellion was an exploration, really, an exploration of who I was, because I didn't even know myself. I mean, I never had the luxury of having those choices to make sense of this whirlwind of a life that I was living. So when I look back, I see somebody who cared deeply, somebody that couldn't hide from whatever they were feeling, and sometimes they were good things. I mean, it doesn't suck winning, right? I mean, it doesn't suck making money and changing your family's life and doing these sorts of things and holding up trophies. And and sometimes days came easier than others, but the disappointments I couldn't hide either, and the rebellion and the anger sometimes I couldn't hide either, So if I was nothing if not authentic to what I was feeling, because for so long what I felt didn't really matter, and that was sort of what I was rebelling most against. And quite honestly, in hindsight, it's probably what made me connect mostly to what made others connect more to me than I would have ever anticipated, is because there was an unspoken authenticity to whatever it is I was going through. Living with your emotions on your sleeve. And, I felt like I suffered enough that I didn't care if people had more judgment, because nobody's going to judge me harder than I judge myself. That's how I kind of felt about it. But it created a lot of strong connections with the fans over the years, which was one of the hardest parts about saying goodbye, was saying goodbye to those that saw me through my ups and downs. But yeah, finishing number one in the world and feeling absolutely nothing was probably the start of what I thought was the end at the time.
Well, it was only the beginning of a new journey. And that's also what brings Andre here to India in the midst of a pandemic. I think it only validates his commitment to India in his journey as somebody who's looking to further the cause of education, increase its reach, increase its access. But I'm going to let you tell that story as well. First, how did you get to that point? How did you find something to keep going for? You told me earlier that it made you look within, made you try and find reason to keep going and to persist. And that's how you really went about and eventually set up your first school in Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. I think at my lowest point was when I did hit number one, but then I started a downward spiral that was pretty aggressive and self-inflicted. I mean, I started doing things to my body, on and off the court that wasn't in line with maintaining any form of success whatsoever. I mean, everybody was shocked to watch me fall from number one in the world to 150 in the world, and I was the only one that wasn't shocked by it. I knew exactly where I was headed based on what I was doing and what I wasn't doing. After 2 years of sort of living that cycle, I got a wild card into this tournament in Stuttgart, Germany. For those of you that don't know what a wild card is, it's when you're not ranked high enough to get in, but you can still sort of, fill the seats, so they let you play. And so they let me into this event, and I got exactly what I deserved. I lost in, quickly first round. And I remember my coach taking me back in the room, and, he shut the door, he locked it, he opened up the mini bar, opened a beer, and just said, listen, we got to either do one or two things. We got to quit or we got to start over. I mean, those are our only two choices at this point, but you're too good for this, and I'm tired of watching you go through it, And so it was a moment where I kind of recognized that I gave myself permission to quit because I was kind of done, And it was funny enough, the second I gave myself the permission to quit was the second I sort of rebelled against that, and I said, you know what? I can't leave the game on these terms. I mean, it's not, but I need a reason, because it's not enough just to get out there and keep doing this. And I remember looking out the window, seeing a lot of cars and a lot of people, and I had an epiphany. And for the record, epiphanies don't change your life, but what you do with them really does give you a chance of changing your life. And the epiphany was this: I looked at all these people, and I was wondering, what do they do? Did they choose what they did? Whether that was their work or their life or their circumstances. And then it started to occur to me: does any of us really choose our life? I mean, do we choose where we're born? Do we choose what our strengths and weaknesses are? Do we choose, you know, what our parents nurture in us, what they don't nurture in us. You know, I mean, the truth is there's perceived choice, but there's really not a lot of it. But just because we didn't choose our life doesn't mean we can't find a way to take ownership of it. So the journey to taking ownership of my life was a process to discover something that was bigger than me, but yet that I was still connected to. And I went on a soul-searching period of time, and I saw this show on 60 Minutes, news program of KIPP, Knowledge is Power. It's a charter school operator in America. And I watched these two guys rolling up their sleeves and changing the trajectory of all these children's lives through educating them. And I recognized that these children truly are the children that don't have choice in their life, right? Without education, without a proper, without the opportunity, without somebody believing in them, thinking a lot of them by caring for them and expecting a lot of them, you know, there's no choice. And no choice doesn't mean bitching and complaining about being number one in the world, you know. No choice for them means back to the streets, back to the gangs, back to the incarcerations, back to not breaking, you know, the downward spiral of their parents and parents before who never graduated high school and never knew the world was bigger than the environment they were living in, you know. And so what seemed to be overnight, I took out a $40 million mortgage and got my charter's license and built my own school in the most economically challenged area of Las Vegas, which, by the way, is the 5th largest school district in America. So, and we're the 50th in kids that we put into college. So it was a perfect laboratory to experiment with how it is that we're failing the kids. The kids aren't failing us, and that started my journey, you know, in building the school, and certainly led on to many other things.
So how did it go from one school, and a school which actually I think had about a room for about 12 to 1,500 children, but a waiting line almost double, triple that, and I think that led to you thinking about how to expand it further, how to get that model out and get access to more people. So what was the formula or the model that you discovered that helped you to increase the reach?
Well, the inspiration behind it was, and I don't know by nature or by nurture, because tennis teaches you one thing for sure, and that's problem solving. I mean, you don't have to be good in tennis for the record. You just have to be better than one person, and sometimes problem solving that person is a lot easier than having another good day of playing good tennis, you know. So you define this muscle of problem solving, and the problem that I was having was there was double the kids on the waiting list than there was in the school. So in the world that I came from, that makes me twice the failure I was the success, right? I mean, here are the kids I'm helping, but here are the kids I can't help. I've raised about $200 million over a period of 16, 18 years of philanthropic dollars so that my school could live in perpetuity, but it's also not scalable. There's just, it's a drop in the ocean. And I started to say, you know, the most frustrating part is I didn't even know who I was as it relates to what I was doing. I wasn't an educator. I mean, I'm an 8th grade dropout. I certainly wasn't an operator. But I came to terms with the fact that I'm a facilitator. And I facilitated this dream for these children. And I was proud of it, don't get me wrong. But I started to ask myself, how can I facilitate more growth, if that's what I am, for those that I steal all these best in practices from? And I put my sort of thinking cap on. I called a meeting with a gentleman in Southern California who understands inner city investing and so forth, and we shared the same passion for education and the same frustration that waiting for government, we're losing a generation. That philanthropy, while very important, my foundation thrives as much today as it has from the beginning, but it's not scalable. I mean, you know, philanthropy ends when philanthropists run out of money. I mean, that's one truth to it. Another truth to it is philanthropy ends when a philanthropist changes, where they want to allocate their dollars. So I knew it wasn't something I could always count on or grow or scale. But the one thing we can still do in our country is innovate. Maybe we can find a way to actually access the private sector. So put together this business model. And the business model is pretty straightforward and of sorts. It's in America, if you don't know how charter schools work, every state, the money follows the child to the school that they go to. A charter school is an optional competitor to the public education system, right? Learning best-in-class practices, helping hopefully refine some of the good things that we can do to make a difference in these children's lives. But as the money follows the kid to your charter school, right? That's like income, right? That's like rent. So you build a $10 million school, you have 800 kids. Let's say the allocation is $10,000 per child. You got $8 million of revenue on day one because there's a huge demand for quality educational seats. So I went to the private sector, sold them this model that don't give me your money, invest your money. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go build a school. On day one, it's going to be fully incubated. Instead of charging rent and being a landlord, we're going to let them incubate, let them stabilize, and then through the tax-exempt bond market, refinance them out a mortgage payment that allows them to buy back the school and have ownership. It drops their normal payments by at least 50%. So you're not right in the backs of anybody to do this. And then you're returning a percentage to your investors that satisfies a like-minded investor. Somebody doesn't want to give away their money, but somebody that doesn't need huge returns, but somebody that cares about real societal daunting issues being addressed. And those are what I call the realists. Those are the ones that understand that there's a responsibility to allocate part of your investment portfolio to things that are really addressing these needs. And so with that model, it took me 1 year philanthropically to build a school for 1,200 kids. In 9 years, we've built 125 of them now across the country. So and it's still not enough, right? I mean, we're never done with our search for how to comprehensively address the needs that are out there in education, and nor did my journey stop there.
So now India. And how does your mission or your aim to further the cause of education lead you to India, your partnership with Square Panda? What are you hoping to achieve with that?
Well, what really got me to come to India was the food. So I'll start with that. But no,
the spicy food?
It's very spicy, actually. So one of the things that I realized in building all these schools for all these great operators is they all had the same pain point. They all had the same, stress level, and that's early childhood literacy and second-hand English language learning. And the reason why that's such a dramatic pain point is because 66% of our kids don't read fluently by the fourth grade. And once you cross that Rubicon of learning to read to learn, you go from trying to understand what it is you're reading from just a word perspective to actually processing content. So the trajectory of a child's life in education hinges dramatically on this inflection point. And that's why about 6 years ago, I helped start this little company called Square Panda. And Square Panda is based on the neuroscience that we actually really know, right? We know now by putting these little saltwater electro shower caps on anybody, how every individual brain works and how it works differently. And when I went to Stanford and met with Bruce McCandless, a gentleman there that's a neurologist, and he showed me the findings, it was shocking to me how we have the knowledge of figuring out how the brain works, but we have no distribution vehicle to really putting it out there in true scale. So we built one hell of a team with a full commitment from certain investors, me being the first and largest, to put together a team that could create the power behind engaging kids in gamified activity that meet them in real time individually and intervening where they are in their process of learning a second language or learning how to read. And quite frankly, my complete overall inspiration is about the same thing that started me. It's shortening those lines. It's not having 3,000 kids on the waiting list. It's not having millions and millions of kids overlooked. This to me was the crucial part of it. So being here in India is, first of all, we're basically an Indian company. I mean, let's just, most of our employees are based right out of Mumbai. It is the greatest opportunity to have the greatest impact because the need is so great and what we do addresses such a significant part of the pain points that exist in the kids that aren't reached here. So that's a big inspiration for me to be down here.
You touched upon how playing tennis helped you also implement certain ideologies or mantras in the way you actually run things, whether it be in your foundation or otherwise, systems in place or how to deal with people. Share with us as a leader, what are some of the other aspects that you find have helped you, that long career in tennis has actually helped you in what you're doing now?
Well, as I mentioned, problem solving, I think, is number one. I think number two, it's always working backwards from a goal and then understanding how that breaks down into what I need to do today, and then having the discipline of execution, right? So you just can't do something overnight. You have to plan your work your plan. And I think there's a discipline that comes with what I did for 21 years professionally that overlaps into my post-tennis for sure.
So I think it's really important we're talking about this, and we've spoken about this before as well, in terms of setting those goals and the kind of pressure even today the younger generation has to succeed. You talked a little bit about how the definition of success was skewed for you already made for you when you first set out. Today, how much of success is really a combination of drive versus hard work versus talent or luck?
Well, luck means nothing if you're not prepared for it, right? I mean, let's call it like it is. There's not a company out there that is really successful that can't claim a level of luck along the way. But there's a lot of companies that don't exist that probably had plenty of luck they didn't recognize, So I think luck is a pretty small, component of my certainly the journey of growth. You have to be nimble. You have to be persistent. You have to execute. And you have to execute on a daily basis, and you have to be able to make those adjustments. I mean, listen, this last year has been painful for the entire world, right? I mean, we've all been asked to make adjustments in our lives, and those of us that have made some of those adjustments have found some silver linings, and as hard as it's been sort of being separated from each other, it's also in one respect highlighted what we really need to do as a society to not lose a generation. So I'm no longer out here explaining what the problem is, right? We all know what the problems are. But now we're just talking about the solutions, and there's a silver lining in that as it relates certainly to Square Panda and what we're doing here, in India. But you have to recognize it, and you have to be inspired by those challenges. And to me, that's all about people. You don't invest in things, you invest in people, and you surround yourself with really great people. You surround yourself with a really great team, and then you don't stop. You don't stop until you cross the finish line. And then, so for me, success is about engaging in my life with that sort of tenacity and with that sort of commitment to being very present in the day. Because it's not defined on if the company grows to this. It's not defined if I win a tennis tournament. It's not defined by how much money you make. It's defined truly by how you engage in your life and the impact that you have in doing so, and I strongly believe that it requires everybody to have a seat at the table, not just philanthropy, you know, not just the private sector, not just government, not just, you know, communities. I mean, everybody needs to figure out how to play their part in solving some of these issues. And you know, I mean, I've had a great time listening to so many speakers here over the, you know, the past couple days. But, you know, I really want to drive home how important it is to find innovative ways to create scale and sustainability, because that's hugely important. I mean, there was a speaker on earlier today. I won't mention his name because he's not here to sort of restate his position on anything. But, you know, I found it comically ironic that he was using this technology on this screen earlier today to undermine educational technology, you know, and building a business that, you know what the...
Let me give some context to that. I can see some perplexed expressions. We had
You're good if you can see the expressions under the mask. You're really good.
Yeah, no, I know I am good. But no, we had a panel on education, and there was a suggestion that perhaps some of the edtech companies were eating into a market, you know, trying to be profitable vis-a-vis actually providing their services in a non-commercial manner. And I think the pushback from Square Panda was that, you know, you could be running a social entrepreneurial venture, so it could be more affordable, but it's still reaching far more people than, you know, than, for example, otherwise such a venture would. So just because it's a business, it doesn't necessarily imply that they're trying to be profitable in this particular capacity.
Well, let's follow that other form of thought process to its logical conclusion. Yeah. We need to take all textbooks away from children because there's a textbook manufacturer out there. Doesn't make a great deal of sense, right? You know what the #1 teaching tool is in the world? YouTube. YouTube. Let me give you two extreme examples. My daughter comes from our environment, and she wants to make mom and dad dinner. Puts on YouTube, figures out what she wants. No more recipe books, and she learns and she makes a great dinner. Now you fast forward to, you know, the southern Pacific island of where there's a farmer. This farmer has to farm to feed his family. A part breaks on his tractor, can't farm. What does he do? Pulls it up on YouTube, learns how to fix it, doesn't have time to not do that, right? So to bring... Education is one of the only industries that has remained absolutely stagnant and uninnovative for 200 years. I mean, if I brought somebody from 200 years ago into the future, I could walk them into an airport, and they're going to say, what is this? And you're going to explain to them how we have machines that fly now. You walk them into a train station, same concept applies. You know, you walk them into a hospital, same concept applies. You walk them into school, they're going to say, oh, this is a school, right? And by the way, we're doing that in the most important area that we have as a society, which is education of our children, which is our future. So why are we not trying to fill in the gaps to come up to speed on what's actually required to create a customized, very personalized, very adaptive, very interventive on a day-to-day basis, and use it as a tool to accomplish, if anything, one or two of these objectives. And the only way to really do that at scale is to bring partners in and to create an environment where we can prove that this is solving for some real daunting societal issues.
So using technology and, of course, good partnerships and collaborations to really get those tools out there, and education that reaches a lot more people and the masses as well, right? Looking to empower, of course, an entire new generation. we'll take some questions from the audience on that a little later in a few minutes. But I know that there is a lot of interest also, of course, in whether or not you're still connected in any way to tennis. I know you were coaching, of course, everyone knows that, for a while. Do you still go back to the courts? Do you go back with Stephanie for a practice game now and then?
I try to avoid it at all costs.
Really?
Yes, because it really tests our marriage. You know, it's very competitive. No. But on a serious note, I do want to stay involved in the game. The game has given me a platform to have my life's work. You know, and to wake up every day with a clear desire, inspiration, and passion for something. So I couldn't have done it without tennis. So I do try to stay involved. And the area that I find that I most connect to is anybody that really wants to learn and grow, the mentoring side of it. Not coaching is a little different. Coaching is management on the road and that sort of thing. But there's so much to a one-on-one sport that, you know, we don't have the luxury like a team sport where the dynasty can pass down so many learnings. You know, you really, there's a lot you learn over dinner, to be quite honest. There's a lot you learn over just talking about what's required, what's asked of you, what the objective is. You know, all these little things. And I love people who love to learn because, right, when you stop learning, you stop teaching. That's just something I've always believe strongly in. And so when I see a desire to learn, then I feel an inspiration to engage. So I do work with some players who are open to and making the effort to, you know, come to my hometown and spend time and understand what's really, you know, in their future if they do things a certain way.
How has the sport changed since you know, you were really completely involved in it? When you look at what's happening today, are you impressed with the quality of players? Do you feel it's tougher for them today? Are there other changes that you see that surprise you, or you know, or that you actually foresee now going forward as well?
Well, I've had the luxury of playing in multiple generations, right? The first kind of generation was, you know, Jimmy Connors days. Then we moved into the Lendl, the Edbergs, the Beckers, and then we moved into the American phase of the Sampras, the Courier, the Changs, and then I had the unfortunate opportunity to run into the Federers and Nadals, right? So as a result, they put an end to all that. But no, you're looking at an incredible era of tennis champions right now, the best ever, and they're all playing in the same generation. You got one guy who's the best on fast and grass, you got one guy that's the best on clay, and you got one guy that's the best on hard court. And they, by the way, have 20, 20, and 18 Grand Slam titles, and they've all had to do it playing against each other. So it's pretty darn remarkable what we're watching now. But the greatest change I think I've seen in the game, and certainly the change that ended my desire to want to stay out there and put myself through it, is the amount of spins that are created. Because people really underestimate how much geometry is in tennis. And one of the things that I specialized in that made me a little bit different than the rest was, you know, my ball striking ability, but also my ability to take the ball early and maintain a certain control of the point. But when you can change spins and you can change trajectories and you can change angles, you change dimensions, right? And when you change dimensions, you change rules of engagement. So no longer was I safe hitting a quality ball, taking over the court, when now all of a sudden I had to worry about a ball 10 feet over the net, up the line, not bouncing in until it actually bounced, right? So that sort of changed my whole optimism and being able to make inroads against that kind of spin. That, you know, the athlete has gotten faster, the athlete's gotten stronger, they've gotten more longevity. I mean, I thought one record that might never get beat is being the oldest number one at 34 years old, and then Federer decides to do it at 37 or 38, right? And he's still going. And you look at Novak, at 32 years old here soon, who's probably going on 26, you know, and you look at Nadal, who I was convinced his body was going to break down with the way he plays, and he's still out there doing it and probably likely to win another, you know, French Open. So in all respects, they are the greatest of all time, and the depth of the game might be a little different, but a lot of that has to do with the standard they set at the top.
I'm also going to get some audience questions in because I know there are going to be plenty of questions on tennis. Yeah, there already. So, yeah, if we can get the mic there.
So I was listening to your statement and this chat, and the first thought which came to my mind is the greatest thing about in life is winning a match, and the second greatest thing about life is losing a match. Right, so this is a very, very big learning I took from you today. And on the question side, I wanted to ask you, and we want to take a mentorship from you, that as far as India is concerned, why is that we are not able to perform in international tennis as compared to other sports like cricket, like badminton, hockey, all those sort of things? So why are we not performing to that level which you feel we should as a country? And I think that's it.
Sure. Well, I had to deal with Leander and, you know, in a couple big situations. Leander Paes back in the day, and Vijay, who's Armitage, who's a dear friend of mine now, and you know, so you have had some success. I mean, listen, let me speak generally first, because there's a nuanced answer to your question that really depends on decisions made by the federation here, right? So the one thing we know basically in tennis is you need good weather, right? And you have it here, right? You should be able to be fine on that department. But if you grow up in rainy, like for England finally figured this out, right? Because you're playing on fast courts, you're learning fundamentals that are pretty one-dimensional in nature, and it doesn't adjust to the different surfaces, right? So weather is grossly important. Also, you need access to play, right? You need the facilities to play. So you need space, right? Because if you don't have enough courts to put enough volume through to sort of start seeing who really is gifted at the game. So I don't know exactly how that works here. And then you need the right people. You have to bring in a trickle-down system of tennis experienced people that can a bit like teachers. Like here, we need to teach the teachers how to teach the students, right? One of the things we address in our platform in coming here, which is it's a huge part. It's no different in tennis. You know, if you're going to have somebody working with these players, they better have a great deal of experience, or they better have learned a great deal from somebody that does have a great deal of experience. Because if you start this sport wrong, there's no coming back from it. You don't change your game when you're 14 or 15 years old. I mean, I know that sounds pretty dramatic, but fundamentals are such a key component to overall success as the pace of the game increases as you get better. So you find a lot of coaches, not just here, but other places, that want the child to hit the ball well, but they're not recognizing that the quirks in a swing or the hitches in the swing create real liabilities when the speed of that ball starts to pick up as they get older. So recognizing that from a fundamental perspective at an early age is very crucial. So I'll pull shy of criticizing how they do it here, because first of all, I don't know. But secondly, those same rules apply everywhere you go.
So how about opening an academy in Delhi NCR?
Good.
Do you want to fund it? I'll do it.
So I was looking at Anchor. She said that she had your poster at her home. And
Who?
I was saying I had Steffi's poster at my home. So
you want to fight, or what do you want to do? No, what?
Thank you.
No,
So
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all.
All right, should we get another question? Yes.
Hello, I just wanted to
And ma'am,
congratulate-
do introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Anjali Prakash from Learning Links Foundation. We are a not-for-profit working in education and are in touch with Square Panda to use their services for children across India. I wanted to congratulate you on the choice of helping children learn better. I think it's one of the most important and noble things that one could do. And we in India strongly believe in giving quality education to every child. So I wanted to know what are your views on, what else we could do to expand that reach. For early childhood, there's a lot of focus with the government this year in India. And, what would be your input on expanding and scaling that reach to every child in India?
Yeah, well, the challenges that exist in the expansion are daunting in the sense that we also need to educate the teachers too, right? Teacher training would be highly important. But what I would also say about reaching the most effective, efficient way, reaching more kids and reaching them more profoundly or more, specifically, is I think we've learned this globally now. I think we've started to really recognize that early childhood investment, right, is where you're going to get the greatest social return on your capital, right? So so you could spend 5 years bringing a child up to speed once you realize, they have certain impediments, certain handicaps, certain obstacles, or you can invest in them at an early years where you never run into those things. So investing at an early age, when the elasticity of a child's brain is highly the most developable years, 2 to sort of 8 years old, that cements a lot into their future. So early childhood focus to me is by far more important. If you're just talking about sheer success and if you're looking at results of your, time on task, that would be a comment I would make.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is our focus in India as well.
Good for you. It's I realized that when I built my first school, I started in 3rd grade because somebody told me if you start in 4th grade, it's like a Hail Mary into the end zone. You're hoping to reach the kid if they've already been that far along and sort of disserved, right? If you start in 3rd grade, they call it a 2-minute drill in football. I don't know how much you know about American football, but there's these moments where you have 2 minutes left on the clock, you got to march down the whole field, and it's actually really achievable, but it's a lot of hard work and things have to go right. So I started by making it, challenging myself as much as possible, and then I quickly realized, why am I doing this? I need to start in pre-K, and I need to let these kids filter through a proper system that actually expects a lot from them because they think a lot of them. And watching the first graduating class that started in 3rd versus the first graduating class that started in kindergarten was a dramatic difference in how they performed.
I think I see another question.
Hello. Yeah. Hi. I'm Pawan, and I used to run an edtech company earlier, and now I'm working with an NGO, Roundtable India, which builds classrooms for students across the country. And in fact, we build 1 classroom a day. So that's the kind of infrastructure we try to build. But my question is more about your book, which I've read twice. Okay. And I really felt that you really opened up your heart when you wrote this book. So my question is, to cut it short, it takes a lot of courage to really write down everything, And so what went into your mind when you decided to really lay it open, just like this? I mean, very tough. You have talked about things, you were a rebel. You did how your dad, really put you to talk a lot of work, I mean, very difficult to talk. What went into your mind?
Well, first of all, I wanted to understand my own life, through a literary lens. I wanted to do that for myself. So I didn't sell my story to some publisher, take their money and then be told, how long I have to write it, what I need to put in there, what I need to take out. I wanted to have full control over understanding my life, so I invested in it. Took me about 3 years in total to write the book. So, and you're right, it was a process, and at times very, very difficult. I think the thing that got me over the line to turn the book over and sort of give birth to it in the world, regardless of how it does, regardless how people feel, regardless of what they're going to think of me. I mean, I had more to lose than to gain from doing it. But I think the one sort of crucible moment that I had was when I could honestly say, if somebody reads this book, they're not going to just know more about me, but somewhere in there, they're going to know a lot more about themselves. And when I honestly believed that, I felt compelled to jump out of the airplane. You know, it was hard, but I think when you change your perspective a little bit, it's actually pretty liberating as well.
I think we have time for just one last question.
Hello?
Yes,
I would
go
like
ahead.
to ask. Yes, here.
Sorry.
I'm Chaitanya. I work as a marketing for an American pharmaceutical company. That is MSD, if you know. And so my question is, when I was growing up, I'll be honest that I was your biggest fan. And I was, if you see sports, I would be supporting Liverpool instead of Manchester United. I'll be supporting Stone Cold instead of The Rock. So basically...
And me instead of Sampras, right?
Yeah. So I never liked Sampras. I used to think you were like Stone Cold. So, and you both are bald actually. So, but as a fan, sometimes you feel disappointed that I may not be the type of a popular opinion. And though I was very happy when you got married to Steffi Graf, which was #1.
I was happy too. So I'm glad we shared
there
that
was a
together.
vicarious feeling that now the person I follow has got something the best. But as a person, like I would like to come to the right question. Like sometime in corporate, we are working very hard, but sometime due to boss or something, there is another person who plays smart or who will become more popular than you. So how is that feeling when you go to bed that you may not be the #1, but you supposed to be the #1?
I'm so sorry. I didn't hear the last
I
part.
think
There was
let
biggest
me
error of rivalry
paraphrase.
between Pete Sampras versus Andre Agassi. So during that time, mostly the slams, everything, the fan, Pete Sampras was taking. So how was that feeling, and how were you overcoming that feeling?
Okay,
When you want to be #1,
Yes.
but you're not there, and he's using that analogy for the
Gotcha,
corporate world.
gotcha.
So when you're in a competitive
Understood.
space and you feel like you deserve to be in that position, but you're for some reason not in that position, how do you cope with that?
Sure. So, tennis, I had the luxury of playing a sport that actually quantified how good you are, right? It had a number next to your name, right? And it had a scoreboard that told you if you're a winner or if you're a loser, but what I learned in the process is there's a lot of things that the scoreboard doesn't say, and your life in becoming better based on what number's next to your name doesn't change regardless what that number is, because you can be 140 in the world or you can be #1 in the world. You better be getting better. And that was the eye-opening experience for me. Getting to #1 the first time, I can almost say sometimes feels like it happened by accident. Like whoa, I'm #1. Getting to #1 in the world the second time, you're always aware of where you're not. You know how much work certain things take. You know what a bad day means. You know what a good day doesn't mean, right? You're constantly aware of this. So the discipline that's required is in a daily approach that allows you to focus on bite-sized goals and objectives that are taking one step in that direction, right? And that means not just your training and not just your decision-making, but sometimes resting, right? Sometimes it's in you don't know what your opponent's doing. So you end up becoming this tortured perfectionist, because when you're alone in your gym and you want to push yourself a little bit more, all you need to do is think about what somebody else might be doing. And if they're doing that one extra set, if they're doing that one extra hour of practice, if they're doing that little bit extra of sleep every night where they feel a little bit more rested, then they're doing it better than you, and that's gonna play out over time. So you end up pushing yourself to places you never thought you were capable of going, but you're always doing it a step at a time, regardless of what the ranking is. So in the corporate world, there is no necessary number, right, that says I'm better or not better. Every business has different goals and objectives, different definitions of success. You know, so there's no real defined number. But what I've learned is that doesn't matter even if there was. So if there's not, it should even matter less. What needs to matter more is what you're doing as a company every day to make yourself better and take a step closer towards the goals that you set for yourself, the expectations that you have for yourself. And that becomes about living in a very present way, as opposed to living in a reactive way. I've never worried about competition because I can only control what I can control. And if I don't control what I can't control, then shame on me. And if I'm controlling everything that I can't control to the best of my ability, then what do I have to be ashamed of? So as a result, this becomes the muscle that you sort of build over the years. I hope that somehow addresses your question.
I think that was a wonderful answer, and I think it's also a great note to end on. I think we're totally out of time. It's very quickly, my producer is she's already staring at me, so.
I don't think he cares.
Good evening, sir. Myself, Amit Srivastava, working in Indian Railways. My question is just for the parent perspective. Just you told me that you become champion as your father wants to. You have 2 kids. So what do you think about your kids? That they will also become champions like you and Steffi?
They already are in our minds. They already are.
That's amazing.
I'll just answer that real quickly. You know, I didn't have choice in my life. My wife didn't have choice in hers. So the first thing we're doing is we're giving our kids that choice. The second thing we're doing is to make sure that their choice is reflected in how they live. So you can't talk the game and not walk the walk. So that we hold them accountable to the choices they made. My son plays baseball, and my daughter is 17, and just a beautiful, beautiful spirit. I don't know what they're going to do on a playing field, off a playing field, but I can tell you we're really proud of them, love them to death, and they're beautiful human beings adding to society. So they're overachieving.
There's a lesson in there for all parents, I think, and yes. And I think there were some really good questions today. So audience, thank you so much. It is so rare to get the opportunity to have a nice in-depth conversation, cover so much ground, get so much of your insight, very valuable insight, and also, of course, a chance to learn from you of the kind of impact you're looking to make through education, through EdTech, particularly here in India, where I think it's really meaningful and something that's going to go a long way towards really empowering our future generations. So Andre, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.